Good afternoon, everybody. It's Eddie Webb here at the New Media Lab. We have a real special show for you today, and I want to welcome this year's co-host for the show, Keegan Choffat. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. My name's Keegan Choffat. I teach digital art, and I work with Dr. Eddie Webb in the New Media Lab.
This year's theme, what we wanted to do with the podcast was to celebrate our faculty and all the amazing work they do, not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom through their committee work and the different assignments that faculty have here at Mesa Community College. And today we have Dr. Lutfi Hussein. And Lutfi is a residential faculty in ESL, and he is the current chair and leader of our IRB policies and programs. And can I call you just Lutfi, or do you want me to call you Dr. Hussein?
No, Lutfi is perfectly fine.
Lutfi, will you introduce yourself to our listener?
Well, first, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity. So my name is Lutfi Hussein. I am a residential faculty in the English department at Mesa Community College. I do teach English as a second language as well as English courses such as linguistics and writing. Currently, I am serving as the IRB chair in the district. IRB, that is Institution Review Board in Maricopa Community College.
Well, we want to really thank you for making time to come talk to us. I know a lot of faculty do projects. A lot of faculty that come here, maybe they have a master's, and then as a couple of years go by, they get interested in doing doctoral work. And even though some of those programs have changed, for many years you had to do very thorough dissertations, and a part of that IRB process to get your credentials to study humans. And it's a very high ethical order, which is right. That's the way research should be. Everybody knows exactly what's going on. And these policies have developed over time based on, I would imagine, misdoings as well as good vision on the part of the academics who are working in this area. So we wanted to start off just talking a little bit about the historical perspective of IRB. So could you give our viewers, a little bit of the history of human subject research? What is the beginning of that?
Sure. Excuse me. So first, probably we want to define human subjects research. What is that? A human subject research study is a study that involves interaction or intervention with living individuals or obtaining identifiable private information of living individuals. So if somebody approaches you asking you to fill out a survey or to be part of a focus group, that is intervention and interaction with the individual. And they have to go through an application process and IRB approval process. So in modern history, there were no guidelines and ethical guidelines and policies regulating this kind of research. Probably wasn't until the second half of the 20th century that, governments became interested in developing policies and guidelines that determine what is permissible and what is possible and what is appropriate in conducting human subject research. And as you alluded to, there were cases of abuse, of unfortunately, in some cases, tragic results where participants did not know the full extent of the research they were involved in. They may not even have known they were part of research. They were not asked to whether they would volunteer or not, so it was not voluntary, and they were not given an option to provide consent. And so once that became public information, there was a public outcry in the U.S., and in the world after World War II, actually, because in concentration camps, inmates, they were subjected to treatment by scientists and medical experts without their permission. And out of that came the Nuremberg Code of 1942. And then later in the U.S. in the 70s, there were other cases of abuse of either marginalized groups or uneducated, impoverished communities. and they suffered as a result of that. And so Congress got involved. There were congressional hearings, and then out of that came the Belmont report that specified that, any kind of human subject research has to, there were 3 principles guiding that Belmont report, which were respect for persons, that a person should be given the opportunity to decide if they want to volunteer or not, and to be given the opportunity to provide consent. And then there was beneficence, that is, we have to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks of such research, because often there are inherent risks to varying degrees in conducting research like this. And finally, justice, that is, the individuals participating in the study, they have to be treated, they should be, the benefits and the risks should be equally distributed or fairly distributed, so that everybody, would have an equal chance of benefiting from that research. I know that's. I just wanted to give as much of a background as possible, but as you said, going to the main premise that so there were cases of abuse that finally and thankfully resulted in coming up with regulations and policies that guide now the work of the IRB in the U.S. and other ethics, research ethics committees, as they are known in outside of the U.S. in other countries.
So, is this the federal regulation around the common rule that shaped this policy?
That is correct. So the Belmont report, it was the impetus for the common rule. So it's known as the common rule because it's adopted by several agencies, federal government agencies and programs. Right now, I think there are over 20, maybe there are 21 after the most recent changes to it that were made in 2018. So that is the common rule. So the common rule is the list of regulations that help IRBs determine what is appropriate and what is not appropriate, what is permissible, what is not, and conducting human subject research.
And, this is really valuable information and, as an ethical society about how we look at subjects in research. I know when I was going through the licensing process at NAU, and then I had to work, not had to, but I had the privilege of working. One of the cases was hospitals were drawing blood off of indigenous people, I think Havasupai.
That is correct, yes.
And then they were using that genetic coding, and it got pretty ugly, and they sued them and won. Ironically, I was in the hospital a couple of years ago, and they came in, and I don't know how, but they looked at, I guess, birth certificate. I still don't know how, but they said, "Hey, we see you're, tribal member, blah blah blah. We'd like to draw some blood, and we'd like to, use this in this test we have going on." And I said, "No, I don't want to do that." And they were like real pushed back on me a few times. No, and I just said no. I cited the case, like I just don't want to be involved in your thing. And I wouldn't have known about that had I not, gone through the program for IRB that you put me through in NAU. But before we leave the history stuff, Keegan, do you have anything you'd like to ask?
I do. So this common rule was passed in 1991, and the last time they updated it was 2018. Do you know if there's any specific cases that prompted that requirement for updating?
Yes. Thankfully, it wasn't because of cases of malpractice or abuse, thankfully, because I would like to think we're beyond that now. But when you think of the change in technology in the past few decades,
from 91 to 2018,
there's been a lot of change, and especially as it applies to research. So, technologies are used to capture data and analyze data and communication and all sorts of things. So the change in modern technology as it applies to research, academic research and biomedical research. Earlier you mentioned, drawing blood, and so biomedical research. So given, the kinds of changes that have happened, they felt they needed to address some of those changes in the law, in the regulations. And so that was one of the main reasons why the federal government decided to revise the common rule, and that happened in 2018. And so one thing, for example, I can tell you is that It used to be identifying, part of the definition of human subject research is obtaining identifiable private information, either through interaction, intervention, or collecting data. That is identifiable private information. But then they added biospecimens, identifiable biospecimens, because, given the new changes in technology and medical research, biomedical research, they felt, that, there are new technologies now that we can access, not just data, but the biospecimens of individuals. So they wanted to include that in the laws.
And I think one of the main points is that early on, even in university classrooms, professors were performing studies on their students, and their students didn't know that. And that really prompted, this ethics environment that you can't do study. It's unethical to do studies on subjects that they don't know. And so you have to inform them. And then the other way, in modern business, big data, like you go on Amazon, you buy a pair of socks, and all of a sudden you get a link, on your phone for 5 other brands of socks. That's mining data and patterns. It doesn't disclose your personal information.
Yes.
Sort of. But you know what I mean? So you start to see these patterns. And so a lot of this IRB and the common rule, let's talk about jurisdiction, right? This happens when we know we're doing research, specifically on humans, correct?
Correct. I mean, there's also research involving animals, and which is another side of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
About people knowing that they're not being manipulated or a part of something that they don't want to be a part of.
That is correct.
And it's just a way to make sure that.
So the study has to be designed as a research study. I mean, that is key. That's why it's human. It has to meet the definition of research to begin with. Yes.
Yeah, and right there, I still, even in my 102 classes, I teach research methods and real world research. Love those books, to talk about the instrument and the method, instruments that we use.
The scientific method of doing research, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just love that stuff.
Yes.
Very, very fascinating. How you set it up, and I think you helped me with some surveys. And I don't remember. It's been a while now, but I know you helped me a lot. And you helped me as a representative of the Maricopa Community College district as their lead person in this the IRB systems that we have. So for our listeners, what exactly does the IRB or the Institutional Review Board do, and why is it important at the community college level?
Well, the IRB, the IRBs came about to protect the rights and welfare of individuals. And their work, the work of the IRB, is regulated by federal law, by 45 CFR 46, and it lays out the composition of an IRB, who can serve on an IRB, and the function of the IRB and the role of the IRB at the institutional level in the human subject research enterprise. And it is important, not just at Maricopa Community Colleges. It is important because it promotes research, it safeguards the rights and welfare of the participants. And we are required, as an institution that receives federal funds, we're required by law to have an IRB, or at least to have the research done on human subjects to be approved by an IRB. That could be an external IRB. Some education institutions may not have their own IRB. They would go through, an outside entity that will do the work of an IRB for them, like a privately independent IRB. But thankfully, given the emphasis in the district and the leadership of the district on promoting understanding and research and learning in Maricopa, they've created an IRB, and I'm very proud to be part of that.
So if memory serves me right, here, I'm faculty at Maricopa, but I'm getting my doctorate at NAU, and both institutions required IRB training and credentials. And I feel like I got my credentials out of Florida somewhere. if I remember.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, the training actually is one of the main programs that do deliver and provide training. It's called CITI program, which stands for Collaborative Institutional Training Initiative. It's a private entity, and institutions subscribe to it. So an institution organization would pay a fee to allow its researchers or students, in the case of, in our case, to do the training through their, website. So it's done online. IRB members also have to do training so they offer different kinds of courses and workshops and different kind of trainings. And so IRB members have to do a training that includes the training that a researcher would do. So yeah, it's a private entity. The training is done online. Again, the training that we recognize, the one provided by CITI, City for short. So regardless of the institution you're actually attending or where you intend to conduct your study, different people will end up doing the same training because it's the one that is recognized nationally as the entity doing and providing that training.
So in some ways, it's sort of like, as the institution, we have our accreditation process, but as an individual, if you're doing research on living human beings, you have to have this credential.
Every researcher, before they start working with human subjects, they must have, to go through the IRB process. Yeah. An IRB would require the researcher and anyone on their team that will have access to that identifiable private information. Everyone on the team, the research team, must have the training already in hand when they submit the application for approval.
Right.
So the IRB would require that. And then, in our case, we provide anyone affiliated, whether it's an employee or a student or even an external researcher who comes to us saying, I would like to conduct a study here, but I'm not affiliated with like an independent scholar. We'd say, since you're conducting the study here in Maricopa, you may do the training through us. So through our license, that is, because we're paying a fee to CITI to provide training to those affiliated with Maricopa Community Colleges.
Yeah, and I actually had a third layer because I had 87 people in my study. And I work with my tribal council in Oklahoma where I did my study. So I actually had to, I had to take all of the people that participated in the study and keep all of that information on an external disk. And I had to send that to the tribal council. They actually have it because they're the ones that gave me the green light that I could study internally within our tribal members. And they were very, serious too, again, about protecting people's identity in the study.
Yeah.
But it was really fascinating. I'm glad. It also makes you kind of sharpen your study itself. You have to be very clear all the way through, and that's a good thing.
It is a very good thing on multiple levels. It's good for the scientific method. It's good for the research you're doing, for the thinking you're doing. And it's good because you are showing the respect, that your participants deserve, and the institution as well, and it's all done within the framework of the law. And so, as I said, it's good on multiple levels, and I absolutely agree with you. And since you mentioned the tribal council, so if a study involves a tribe or individuals of a tribe, the IRB would work with the researcher to get approval from their tribal council. So the IRB would not work outside of it. So the tribal council would have to be involved in the approval process. Yeah, so that adds another layer to the approval process.
Yeah, I had to make a presentation to the council. They wrote a letter, and endorsement letter and stuff.
Let's say I'm a researcher, a principal investigator. How do you go about getting a study conducted?
Yeah, so we have a clearly defined application process. The very first thing that a PI, a principal investigator, would need to do is obtain site authorization. And that form is on our district IRB webpage. So the site authorization, this is a form that is filled out by a PI. It could be the PI or co-PI, anyone on the research team, either of the PI or co-PI. They fill it out. It asks about, the kind of research, who the intended participants are, In our case, the sites or the colleges that will be involved in the study, I mean, we have 10 colleges and the district office. So we have 11 entities or sites, as we refer to them in the form. And then they tell us a little bit about their methodology, whether it's going to be, obtaining data from, for example, the Office of Institutional Effectiveness or research, as opposed to conducting interviews or sending a survey, for example. So that's intervention with the individuals or obtaining the data. So we need to learn a little bit about their research. It's like a 2-page form they fill out, and they submit it to us. It goes to the IRB office, and then internally within the IRB, depending on how many sites are involved, that form will be shared with the IRB members from those sites. Let's say there are 5 colleges involved. So the IRB member from each college will receive that form, and it will provide feedback to the PI. We want to make sure that we have all the answers that we have at that point. This is pre-IRB approval. This is the site authorization stage. And then once we are satisfied with what we have in the form, we advance that to the VPAA, the Vice President of Academic Affairs at the college in question. And then the VPA has the decision, makes the decision whether to approve it or not, depending on, the resource. Sometimes there are limited resources. They're not available to provide the data collection, or the data sets required. Sometimes there are too many surveys going on at a given time at a given site, so they may decide, well, we're not able to accommodate this request. But very often, these requests are unless there are some really strong reasons not to approve them. Often they're approved with some modification and changes. So the IRB sends the site authorization, letter to the PI. And they take that and they submit that as part of their application. So we have an online application process. They fill that out and submit it. Eddie, you mentioned that working through NAU's IRB and then the district IRB. So in this case, we don't want the PI to duplicate the efforts of going through the application process at one institution and then do the exact same thing at another institution. So if you are a doctoral student, you're pursuing a PhD at a doctorate at an institution. When you come to us with an IRB in hand, you don't have to fill out the application form in its entirety for us. So you just need to submit certain requirements, including the application itself. So you just attach the application you already did for the other institution with their decision email or letter saying that you actually have been approved. And then we have to look at the instruments you'll be using in your study, instruments like surveys and questions for an interview, for example. Then we have, as it's our responsibility, since you will be conducting the study in Maricopa Community Colleges, it falls upon our IRB to vet that application. And so that means we rely on the decision of the other institution's IRB. And so we call that an administrative review. So we're not actually approving the study ourselves, but we are authorizing it, saying that we accept that approval that you have received from the other IRB. So it's a faster and hopefully easier process for the PI.
I'm assuming many IRBs have communication between other IRB offices. There's probably a protocol.
Yes, sometimes. I can tell you that our IRB has a memorandum of understanding with, Grand Canyon University, for example, because we've had lots of doctoral students work on their dissertation at GCU who want to conduct a study in Maricopa. Sometimes they are affiliated with Maricopa, they're employees of Maricopa. Sometimes they're not, and so when they come to us. And since given the increase in the number of applicants, we reached out to the GCU IRB and we said, well, let's work together on streamlining the process so that your students, it's an easier, faster process for them. So you do the approval process, you go through that. They still have to get site authorization from us, of course. And then once they're done with go through your approval process and they get approved, then they come to us and then we'll do the administrative review of that application. Again, as I said, it's an easier, faster process, and that's what we call it. It's an administrative review. And since then, I would like to think the process has been, very efficient and faster. And again, our task is really, our intention is to make the process as user-friendly and efficient as possible.
Like all these different agencies have a common rule for the common rule, the MOUs.
Yes, because, you have the umbrella, which is, the framework that provides the framework for us that is, provided by the federal government. And we all, subscribe to the same set of rules and policies. And so our purpose here is to serve the researcher and our institutions. And so we very often, depending on the kind of work relationship we have amongst ourselves, we may come up with an MOU, for example, just to make sure that all the processes are moving seamlessly and without any problems for the researchers.
Who actually serves on the district IRB? Can somebody who's a principal investigator also be on an IRB? How are the members selected, and what's the typical length of service?
These are excellent questions. As I said, there are 11 sites, 10 colleges plus the district office. Each site has what's called a CR, which is a Research Review Committee, a Research Review Committee or College Research Review Committee. Since 10 out of the 11 are colleges, so we typically say CRRC, Creek for short. So the chief academic officer at each site appoints someone to serve as the Creek chair, someone who would chair that College Research Review Committee. In the case of the district office, the provost would appoint someone to be the chair of the district office College Research Review Committee. So there are 11 Creeks. The chair is by default the IRB member. So once someone is appointed as the chair of the Creek, that chair will be serving on the district IRB as the IRB member for that site. So there are 11 IRB members, and one of them is appointed by the provost, because the provost is what's called the institutional official for our organization with the federal government. We have to actually be registered as an IRB with the federal government. So the IRB, the district IRB, consists of all these Creek chairs / IRB members from the district-wide, that is. They're selected by their VPAs by the chief academic officer. Some of them are faculty members and others are staff members who could come from the Office of Institutional Research or Effectiveness or other departments on campus. And the term, you asked me about the term, there is no specific number of years or limit except for, that is specified in the handbook, and we have an IRB handbook, which is on our website. But it is recommended in the handbook that the IRB member serve for at least 3 years, a term of 3 years, because there is a learning curve. And, it's amazing how much you learn the second year and the third year. So we don't want that, that rich knowledge to go to, we want to make sure we take advantage of that knowledge that different IRB members will be, building through their experience. And with their time on the IRB. So that's the recommendation, that the Creek chair / IRB member have a term of 3 years. Now, could a PI, a principal investigator, serve on IRB? There is no reason why they can't. Some of our IRB members are researchers, whether faculty members or not. But the key thing is they're to make sure we avoid any conflict of interest. They can be involved in either reviewing, to be involved in their own research, right? So they have to recuse themselves from that. But otherwise, yes, of course, IRB members can be researchers.
Because it would make sense for researchers to be IRB members, and it wouldn't make sense if they couldn't do research while they're also serving on the board.
Absolutely. Yes, I absolutely agree with you, yeah. Because it gives them really interesting perspective also on the research process. It's good for them to be aware of what goes on from both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you looking for in terms of expertise or perspective when you're appointing new IRB members?
You want someone who's familiar with with research, preferably with human subject research.
Mm-hmm.
somebody who has done that as part of their, education, training, could be through graduate school, having had graduate degrees. We just want someone who's familiar with the scientific process, to be able to recognize what is expected of proper research, and so that they ask, relevant questions, and they can provide feedback that would be helpful for other IRB members in reviewing the application, but also for the PI. So basically, any employee, given the nature of the institution we work at as a learning institution of higher education, almost any employee with the proper training, educational background can serve on the IRB, whether they're staff members or faculty members. So it would vary, of course, how much they may have been exposed to, academic research and the rigors of scientific research. So there could be a very wide range of backgrounds. So we're not looking for some specific backgrounds, but definitely somebody who's familiar with the research process. And So and of course, having that, once to join the IRB, they have to do the training we talked about earlier, which is done through CITI, the training that is required of IRB members. And it typically takes a little over 20 hours, we have found out, as different members were joining and doing the training, because that training also has changed and been modified over the years. So I on average, I would say it does take a little over 20 hours. So you want someone who's willing to commit 20 plus hours to the training, which is good for a number of years. And then you have to do a refresher to get to make sure it remains valid. It has to be valid for the entire period you're on the IRB.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Currently, what steps does the district take to educate faculty, our staff, and even students about ethical research and the IRB process here throughout Maricopa?
Well, we, as an IRB, we try to provide as much information upfront as possible. So on the web pages we have on the district website, we provide the Maricopa Community College's IRB provides a lot of information upfront on our web pages, and it's on maricopa.edu/about/institutional-review-board. So you can simply search for Institution Review Board under About. So there's a lot of information there. We have templates of forms that they need to submit. There is the site authorization form, which is a web-based form. They can, and through it, they also can access the application form that they have to fill out, which is provided by a third-party vendor. And we have information about what the IRB. We have information about the IRB, what it does, the different forms required. We have the contact information of IRB members and their alternates on the front page as well. And we have a section of frequently asked questions that hopefully gives some useful information for anyone interested and curious about how we do business. So that's one way, which is having that general piece of information out there. And then we try to establish consistency through the different creeks that I have mentioned, the college research committees, by having those regular, periodic, district-wide meetings for IRB members, so that we give out the same message, that we all come together to confer on, any changes we want to make, revising any forms, having any new forms, for example, or any new information we want to provide for researchers or participants. So having that consistency, I think, is key, especially when you have a large district like ours with so many institutions.
We're going through a lot of reorganization across all 10 campuses. How do you see the IRB evolving as a research entity here across the colleges?
Well, there's definitely been an increase in demand for conducting human subject research in the district, and I think one of the reasons for that is the fact that we now offer bachelor's degrees, and I think which would involve more research. So I see the role of the IRB being even more important now, becoming increasingly important, to make sure that we work within the framework of federal regulations and policies, but also within the institutional policies that we have as Maricopa Community Colleges. And so having the consistency, providing clear messaging to both our, the participants in such research, but also those who might be conducting such research. And also many of our colleagues are, seeking doctorates, and they'll be working their dissertations, and we want to make sure that we facilitate that process. We assist them in getting the proper, training they need, and to go through their process, and providing as user-friendly process as possible, and efficient and speedy process as well, because we know how important time is for somebody working on their dissertation. I'm sure you remember that.
Well, yeah, you're by the time you get to this point, you're under a lot of stress. You're learning how to
navigate
conduct studies,
sure,
and what it means, and you're dealing with a lot of different, internal bureaucratic structures and legal stuff, and you want to get it right because you've got years invested into your work.
You're building the plane while you're flying it.
Yes, and I wanted to.
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah. It definitely can be a very challenging time for the research. I mean, anybody who's been involved in that process, can identify with that. I wanted to mention that I want to make sure I address this as well, because this is an important issue for us. Every now and then, I as a faculty member might get not in relation to the IRB, I might get an email by a researcher outside of the district, and they're asking me to distribute a survey to my students or in my classes, or ask my colleagues. I just want to alert our colleagues, whether staff members or faculty members, that if you ever if you ever get such solicitation for research participation, please do not provide, do not conduct that study for them, or have them recruit through you, use you as a recruiting agent for them, because they have to go through the IRB process. So they may have already obtained an IRB and they have it in hand from another institution, but they still have to come and go through the district IRB. And in that case, we might conduct an administrative review, which is a quick, easy, process, but we still have to, we have to vet that application that they had submitted to this other IRB. And we have to authorize it before it actually gets disseminated and distributed throughout the district. So I want our listeners to be really be vigilant in order to protect our participants, whether faculty or employees in general, faculty, staff members, and students. We want to make sure that we protect them and protect information. And so we don't want to discourage anyone from conducting research, but at the same time, we want to make sure that, the research is being done, within the framework of the law.
This is critical information, everybody who's listening to this podcast, because you don't want to see the inside of the legal office, and you get yourself there pretty quick these days if you're not careful. The IRB process is very, very critical to our well-being.
What final thoughts would you like to leave our listeners with about the importance of IRB work? And what would you like people across the district to understand about it?
There are a few things I would like to say in this regard. First, I want to highlight the difference between the CREEC, which is the College Research Review Committee, which in the district reviews student-led applications. Because in many classes in the district, faculty members may have students conduct human subject research. So they need to submit an application to their own CREEC on their own campus. So to find that information, they simply need to go to either the IRB, the contacts page on the IRB page, and contact their IRB member. They can advise them on the process on that site. So every college may have their own unique process for reviewing student applications. So that is one thing I would like to say in this regard. And I would like to encourage our, faculty like yourselves and many of our listeners to introduce human subject research in their classes to their students, because we would like our students to learn more about that and to go through the IRB process and the accreditation process, because I think that, or credentialing process, because I think you can learn a lot about what is ethical in research and what proper research is by doing that. I just, over the weekend, this past weekend, I went to Baltimore. There was the Primer Conference, which is the premier conference for human subject research in the country. And I had the privilege of going, and I thank the Provost's office for supporting my participation in the conference. And it was great to connect with other IRB, professionals and human subject research professionals. It's a great learning experience for me. And when I come back, I always share things I learned there with my fellow IRB members. And I'm looking forward to our next meeting, which is coming up soon. And two things that were discussed in more than one plenary talk at the conference were artificial intelligence. We talked earlier about how change in technology.
The 2018 revision to the Common Rule.
Exactly. So now artificial intelligence is changing the way that we're also generating information, but also processing information, analyzing it.
Might have a 2026 revision.
So who knows? Yes. And so lots of questions about that, not enough answers, nearly enough answers in this regard. So again, the work of the IRB is really important. It's intended to safeguard the rights and welfare of participants, to make sure research is being done within the framework of the law, but also in accordance with our institutional policies. And our job is not. I would not want our researchers or our audience to think of the IRB as an obstacle that they have to overcome. It's a challenge, a bureaucratic office that its mission is really coming from a very positive place, it's a good intentioned,
just a bad actor filter.
Yes, exactly. And so we're happy to work with the researcher and the PI to make sure that they go through the process in a seamless fashion and have an efficient and speedy process. And we work with, every application is different and unique. And so we are happy to work with the individual researcher on developing a really good application that will go through the process without any hiccups and any problems. So and finally, I want to thank you for this great opportunity, and I hope this will generate some questions that will probably end up in my inbox or on the phone. I'd be happy to discuss the work of the IRB anytime, anywhere.
We want to thank you for being here. Listening just to your final statements, I wanted to ask you an additional question here. When things elevate to this level, so for example, a couple presidents ago wanted to do, there was sort of the, morale on campus and all that stuff. And they wanted to do a cultural survey study from people. Does that elevate enough to, you have to get an IRB?
That's an excellent question.
Credential,
yeah.
Or can you do these sort of informal, or where's the line? When does it elevate?
That's a great question. And it's a point we haven't actually addressed, and I'm glad you brought this up. We want to make a clear distinction between, is any survey, considered to be human subject research? No. If it's a survey or if it's a study that is intended as
publication.
Well, okay, let's say what's not human subject research. If it's intended for, if it's a quality improvement project or a program evaluation that's not designed as a research study with a hypothesis, and you have literature, a lit review, and it's not intended for publication as a scholarly publication, then it's not human subject research. So in order for, the line here is whether it's designed as a research study and a survey asking for people's feedback so that you work on the morale on your campus, for example, right? You want to learn how things are done so you can improve upon them, right? You want to think of the services that you offer as an institution, and you want to see if, it's quality improvement. If it's a quality improvement project or study, it doesn't have to go through the IRB. It doesn't require IRB approval. And we have a statement to that effect on our website. So again, it would have to be designed as a research study that is intended for publication that does involve identification, obtaining identifiable private information. So you could be obtaining identifiable private information, like, somebody's name and email address, and then you ask them, what do you think of our campus? Do you feel it's a welcoming campus? Do you like, what you see on campus, parking and the lawn, and because you want to see how you can upgrade things, how you can improve upon the services that you offer your students or faculty or employees. That doesn't qualify as human subject research, and it doesn't need to go through the IRB process. Having said that, myself, and I know our IRB coordinator and their assistant would be more than happy. We are always more than happy to address any question that somebody might have. So if somebody is not sure if what they're engaged in, whether it does qualify as human subject research or not, just send us an email or pick up the phone and call us, and we'll be happy to work with you on that. But if it's not, again, if it's quality improvement, if it's a program evaluation, if it's a faculty member who's designing an assignment, or they would like to know what their students think of this, their readings for this semester, or the assessment tools for this semester, and they want to know if they want to use them again or change them, and they collect that data. So there is interaction with human subjects, but it's not intended for publication or presenting at a conference. So it doesn't qualify as human subject research, and they do not need to go through the IRB.
But a Pepsi challenge comparing the demographic backgrounds of all the participants for publication in a journal, that would definitely be IRB.
It would.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we want to really thank you. This is important information for the welfare of our colleges, our community, and we really appreciate it. I know how hard you work in this area to be informed, to make sure we're informed, and I know you did a great job walking me through the process, and I really, really appreciate it. So we want to thank Dr. Lutfi Hussein, who joined us today. He is our lead representative district-wide for IRB policies. Please reach out to him. He's noted the website that you can contact if you're starting to think about doing a human research project. Again, we want to thank you for being here. In my dad's language, they say, Dona dogo I hayaski gale ahiliga hawa hawa. Take care of each other out there. We are all we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.